Welcome to Behind the White Coat podcast. I am your host, Eric Malara, a first-year medical student. In this podcast, we listen to the stories of those underrepresented in medicine or those with an exceptionally non-traditional background. Today's guest is Lala Forrest. She is a first-year medical student at the Frank H. Netter MD School of Medicine at Quinnipiac University. Lala is the first in her family to attend college and graduated from the University of California, San Diego, with a bachelor's degree in physiology and neuroscience. Lala grew up in rural northeastern California, near Mount Shasta, and is an enrolled member of the Pit River Tribe. She is an advocate for community and has raised awareness for the lack of American Indian and Alaska Native role models in medicine. She was also involved in a social media campaign to raise awareness for Native American youth suicide and substance abuse. It is my great privilege to be able to listen to and learn from Lala's story today. So, welcome Lala, and thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Eric. It's my pleasure to be here.
So I want to start with the white coat ceremony. If you can walk me through and talk to me about that day. You get your white coat, you get your stethoscope, and you read your Hippocratic Oath. So what did that day mean to you?
Oh, man. It kind of was similar to graduation day at UCSD. I think it was the second time that my family, my mom, dad, brothers were all there. And it was such a beautiful moment. And it was so exciting. All the hard work paid off. You know, I remember specifically that Dr. Yeckel was the one who placed the white coat on me. And I was really excited that it was him because he was a major part of why I chose Netter in the first place. But it was crazy. I had a smile on my face the entire time. My partner, Brooks Leitner, was also there with my family. So it was everything that I could have ever imagined. And it was a really happy and rewarding day.
So when did that passion for medicine even begin for you?
So the very first time where I even thought of pursuing medicine was my sophomore year in college. Like you said, I went to UC San Diego, and I met for my very first time the very first Native American physician. His name was Dr. Dan Kalak, and he was a primary care doctor at Indian Health Council, which is in Rincon, California, and he's a primary care doc for his tribe, the Luisinho tribe. And I thought, wow, he's Native, he's like me. I could potentially do this. If he's doing this, I can do this. And that was the very first time where I even thought of medicine. And I went and asked him if I could shadow him, and he said yes, 100%. And I spent the summer shadowing him. I think it was 2012 or 13, somewhere around there. And I fell in love with the career immediately. Like, I remember walking into that tribal clinic and comparing it to my own tribal clinic back at home in Northern California. And I was like, wow, we have some improvements that we can make back at home. And it was just gorgeous. It seemed like Native designed. You walk inside, there's red paint with Native art, very welcoming, Native people working, and it just offered a lot of resources. And I could see Dr. Dan, just how of an incredible leader he was, and how he got along with all the team members, and all the team members looked up to him. And it was just such a cohesive and strong group. And I just wanted to do something similar.
So you mentioned there's things that could improve in your own community. Can you maybe talk about a little bit more about that, and, in general, what life is like, growing up near a reservation and you're having your family members part of the reservation. So what is that life like growing up?
Yeah, so I think, growing up, like I was born on my tribe's reservation. It's actually located in Alturas, California. and my family still resides there today. But I also mostly grew up off the res in Shasta Lake, California, and Redding, California. It's nearby. And I think the major issues are the lack of trust in the community, and seeing my family members. I just can't even recall one family member having a good experience with the doctors, and feeling like they can't go and get care that they need. Like, I remember like some cousins of mine got in a fight, it was bloody, and they just feel like they can't go to the doctor because they're just going to be judged and they're just going to be looked at in a negative way. And so I see a lot of suffering. And I talk to my grandma all the time, and she always tells me like how every time I see her actually in person, she's just like, I can't wait for you to come back here. We need doctors like you. This one doctor, blah, 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 like isn't giving me the medication I need. And so I think trust is a big issue. I think we've never had a Native physician at our tribal clinic before. And I think that that's a goal of mine, is to one day return back to my community and to be that person and to deliver services that I know we need. So, substance abuse and to provide services that join the Western medicine that I'm learning now with our traditional healing, like sweat ceremonies, with recruiting our traditional healers and joining those two together.
Yeah. So, you're mentioning learning about like the Western medicine and your traditional values. So Dr. Daryl Babe Wilson has talked a little bit about that, finding his identity. And one thing he talked about was his parents and himself having like trying to find their identity. And he said, like one of the issues for him was, and at least in his community, which is also your community, the Pit River tribe, is he never felt like he knew his value or his community knew their value and like their purpose. Do you still find that to be true?
I think we're so strong as a tribe and then as one people. I do think that we as a unity, as a people are struggling in certain ways, but I don't think it's anything that we can overcome. And I think as long as we have that foundation of what did our ancestors do? What traditionally did we do? Like, let's keep that and let's use that as our motivation. Our elders are our knowledge keepers, and we respect them and we include them in decisions. Our youth are our future generation. And I think we have a really strong values. But I think on an individual level, which I think is what you're alluding to, it is really hard. I know actually for the very first time in my life in med school, I, for the first time, started experiencing this. It actually makes more sense, like thinking, like listening to what my dad and my mom says, like, oh, it's, growing up back in the day, like you didn't want people to know you were Native. You didn't want to be known as Native. And for the first time, now that I'm in med school, the only Native American in Netter, I, for the first time, felt, wow, like I totally understand where they're coming from. And I can see that losing your sense of your values. And I could see that slowly slipping away. But, I think it's important for people who come from underrepresented communities to realize that and to seek out resources that will help connect them. So I, was feeling that badly this past year, and I was like, okay, I need to get out of here. I need to get out of Connecticut. I need to connect with some mentors and some people who understand my background. And I need to have some sort of healing, emotionally and spiritually. So I, with the support of Netter, thankfully was able to attend a conference not too long ago, back in March, before all this COVID business. And I was able to meet some incredible people, talk to some elders, participate in great workshops, and reconnect. and remember my purpose of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I think as long as there's resources provided and opportunities and people who you can connect with and really get in touch with your roots, I think that will help.
You're saying, high school and even through college, you didn't really have that problem of identity. It wasn't until you went to med school where you were like experience it really for the first time.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it had to do with moving to Connecticut. There's lots of tribal people over here, tribes, very renowned actually, and like the Mohegan tribe and the Pequot tribe. But it was there, I don't know how to say it, but like, I guess growing up in California, there's many more natives, many more tribes. Like I went to UC San Diego and I know that there's like 20 something tribes around UC San Diego. And I just always felt supported. I went into college knowing that there was a Native American student organization I could join. I had Native friends and non-Native friends who were allies, and I just always felt supported, found mentors easily. And then I went to med school and it was a different story.
And so, you mentioned going to the conference, which helped you a little bit, but what else have you maybe done to maybe help you out this year?
I think that was definitely the major thing that helped, and the conference for sure. Some other things include finding a new sport that I love and having some connection to encouraging myself or strengthening myself mentally. Because, a lot of people, like, that's why I enjoy weightlifting. That's the sport I'm talking about. And people, think about it, it's like physically it hurts your body, but it's also just why I fell in love with it is it mentally exercises you and fatigues you. And, you have your good days and your bad days, but you have to always be progressing and, be kind to yourself and encourage yourself. And I think that's also helped me a lot. And, every time before I go and make a big lift, and I think about how my ancestors are with me and I feel connected that way. It's like, oh, I'm here, like I'm doing this. I have the strength and power of not just one, but of many. So that also grounds me. And then I think having a strong support system here too, and at home. I live with my fiance Brooks, and he's been a tremendous support, and I'm very lucky. I know a lot of our students, our classmates don't have somebody at home that they can immediately go to for support, like a family member and stuff. So I'm very lucky in that respect. And he, every time is there for me and listens to me and lets me cry if I'm having a bad day, at Mesh. And he's been super supportive. And I've also just connected with some friends here and just talked things out. And so those are some things.
So it's pretty remarkable that it wasn't until sophomore year of college that you met your first, Native American physician. And I think that just goes to show with, like you said, the lack of representation, growing up, you don't really have a lot of role models to look up to in terms of like higher education, just because there's not many. So where does that process even begin of wanting to get to higher education? Because, like a lot of people, if they want to succeed in something, they look at a role model. And whatever you do, you look at someone who has like a similar background, you're like, I aspire to be them. So where does that process even start for you in high school?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think how I even got introduced to the idea of pursuing a college degree was the fact that I participated in programs specifically for low socioeconomic, underrepresented first generation students. So we had the Educational Talent Search Program, ETS, which is part of a TRIO program. And the TRIO program is like a federally funded program offered nationally at various high schools that help the low socioeconomic first gen high school students apply to college. So I think that is what started it. And being introduced to the idea that how schools worked, oh, this person got an A or this person got a 4.0 and they got an award. Like I remember specifically, like in middle school, there was just like this switch. Like I remember sitting in the cafeteria, out gathering, and all the teachers stand up and call out the names of all the people who got 4.0s. And I like sat down and I was just like, of course I didn't get called. And then I didn't really care about grades or anything. I had no role models, and sort of the expectation was like, oh, my parents would be happy with whatever. I mean, they were happy that I was good at school. I got okay grades, but when that teacher called a list of names and only a few people were walked up and received the award, I remember having that switch of like, well, I can do that. Like I can do that. I can prove that to myself. I can be somebody and I could defy the odds, and I can, and I remember actually having another switch like that in later on, like in 8th grade when it wasn't only just grades, but it was also sports. And we have something called the Record Searchlight, the Scholar Athlete of the Year in Northern California. And I remember my dad opening the newspaper and being like, wow, like that's so amazing. I can't believe these people get 4.0s and also excel in athletics and get MVP, blah, blah, blah. And I just remember, I can do that, Dad. Yeah. And I like literally told him that. And I was like in 8th grade. And then I go and, 4 years later, senior in high school, and I'm nominated for that award. And I actually won it. And I was like, Dad, you remember? You remember that? So I think it's just, I don't know, like seeing, I guess, little admirations of my family or just like of other people and like what they admired, and how the expectation, I guess, was not low, but it wasn't there. And I just fought really hard to show people that it is possible. And I think that's like what really drove me when it comes down to it in high school, and knowing that there is a significant lack of role models. And I have 2 younger brothers who I'm very close to. And I remember in high school, all I cared about was making sure that they went to college, that they did something. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, who am I to say like they should go to college if I didn't go myself, if I didn't make it myself. So I think that was my main motivation, was being a role model immediately to my 2 younger brothers.
Being a role model for your siblings, for your brothers, is really important. And so when you actually went to college, you went to San Diego, which is on the other end of California from where you're at. And so what was that transition like? You have to leave your family, you have to leave your brothers who you want to be a big role model for, but you're going to the other end of California. So what was that like for you?
Yeah. Oh, it was a really tough transition, let me tell you. It was exciting. I remember feeling immediately like when my mom dropped me off, and I felt like I was at some sort of camp that I've never been at before. And it felt very temporary, and it was just exciting. And then I thought so many times, like in the first year, how like, what am I doing? Like I don't belong here. There's nobody, there's no professors here with my background. There's no researchers. Maybe I'm starting to understand like how my family is like, the world education and stuff isn't meant for Native people. And I think that I had to talk to my mom specifically a lot. She was probably my rock during that time. And she just kept pushing me and telling me, she's always there, like to be hard on me when I need it. She's like, Lala, I love you, and you can always come home and I will love you, but I know that this is what you want. This is what you worked hard for. And so she would always tell me hard things like that. And my dad too, like he he also has been there for me, especially recently with med school, and we were talking about that sort of hard time that I've been having. And he said, like, it's if it was easy, then other people would be doing what you're doing. And it's not easy what you're doing. And, you can't expect it to be all flowers and roses. So I think just reshaping my perspective helped a lot during my first year in college and in med school. And when it comes to my two younger brothers, and I think I just had to talk to them a lot and to really let them know, like when I left for college, I told Atun, he's the oldest of my two younger brothers. He's 3-4 years younger than me. And I told him, I was like, brother, when I go to college and I'm doing this for you guys. I hope you know that. Like, I love you and I wish I could be here and help take care of you. But this is something that I need. Like, this is going to be the best thing down the road. And I think just constantly telling him that and saying, like, Atun, I need you to look over Nawoj, my youngest brother, and take care of him and be there for him. And so I think that also helped a lot. And I think they understand that, even to this day, like I still have to be saying those things because years later, I'm still away from home. So it's a continuous thing I have to do.
With your time being away from home in college and med school, what do you think is like the most valuable lesson you've learned from all that time away?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is just how big the world is and how it's filled with so many different incredible people. I didn't even realize how amazing and how big the world was before college. And I think that's been the most enlightening thing, is realizing that when you go and you leave home for an education and you go to university, that there's opportunities for you to grow in ways that you couldn't even imagine, emotionally and spiritually, and like connecting with people, understanding people, their story, and realizing that there's opportunities that you can gain. And, like I didn't even know that there was graduate school when I went to college. Like I had no idea that research even existed. So that was like something big. And then I was like, oh, what's research? And then I started doing summer programs. And then I discovered medicine. It was just like this huge awakening of, wow, this is something I could do. I can have a career. I can do things with my life that are meaningful and I contribute to the greater good. So I think that was the big awe moment.
Can you talk to me a little bit about your campaign with the National Council of Urban Indian Health? Because when I was reading about that, like the one statistic that, really brought my attention was the suicide rate of Native youths. From my perspective, who's a non-Native person, you sort of hear about problems on like reservations and with the natives and the youth, but I feel like it's not really talked about. Or if it is, it's kind of like brushed aside.
Yeah, no, I feel you on that one, Eric. That's exactly right. And it's not just like suicide. I feel that way about just in general, like how Native communities suffer disproportionately from almost nearly every health category. And it's kind of like, wow, like what is being done about this? And, you kind of find out like not much, but specifically in regards to my work with NICU or NACUI, the National Council of Urban Indian Health, I was selected to be on their youth board, and they selected I think 5 or 6 members total from across the U.S. And it was awesome. I got to meet with other Native youth and tell our stories and talk about the importance of this. And I think one thing to highlight is more and more Natives are living in urban settings, and especially Native youth. I think it's like around 2/3 of Natives now live in urban areas. And And when it comes to healthcare and the Indian Health Service and providing care to Native people through the history of with like treaties and stuff, it's mostly provided in a rural context. And so Nakui and us were working on advocating for more services provided in urban locations, and specifically with suicide prevention and mental health. And it was incredible experience in working on that campaign and continuing on and handing that on to like the next year's Native youth, to get their perspective and for them to build on it. So it's definitely an important cause, and I think it's something that's definitely not discussed enough. And unfortunately, yeah, our people, Native youth we're losing them to suicide. And I think on the bright side, though, I know that there's a lot of tribal communities out there, just hearing from conferences and stuff, who recognize this, and there's a lot of tribal run work centered on this.
One of the many issues, like you talked about, there's a lot of issues. And one thing that I really didn't even think about was the diet, the Native diet. And you showed me this video about your uncles, and I wouldn't even really think about that, to be honest, where, the settlers came and they brought in cattle and they brought in all this different livestock, which isn't accustomed to basically like the traditions or the Native diet.
Yeah. I think when you look back and you see all the major change colonization brought, the diet, the change in diet, like our people, we survived off the land and hunted off the land. We ate plants and berries and, wild game, and we were healthy. We didn't have diabetes and obesity and sort of these chronic metabolic diseases that we see that proliferate our communities now. And I think that contributes to it. But then we also have to acknowledge that colonialism brought alcohol, and that really probably was the Achilles heel. And I think right now, currently, we have a lot of our people who struggle with substance abuse and are still suffering from that, from the people bringing that over. And so, yeah, in terms of the traditional diet, I think that I remember going to one workshop, and I thought this was beautiful, hearing somebody say, like, if we don't have in our language, in our native language, a word for this food, then you shouldn't be eating it. Like, this is not traditionally what we used to eat. If we don't have a name for it, then it didn't exist back then. So, like talking about sort of like processed foods and high complex carbohydrates, and, and Native people, the reservations are in the poorest areas in the US, and there's, not high quality food, and with poverty, you end up just buying a lot of junk food, and that also contributes to the metabolic diseases that we see in Native people.
From an outsider's view, as a non-Native myself, like, what do you think we could do, or at least what can we learn from the understanding of Natives?
From that view, I think and then also combining it with my view of like, now I'm in med school, and I don't know what everybody's goals are, but I would highly, highly encourage med students across the world to at least consider working at a tribal community, by providing care for a tribal community. And I think right there in itself there's going to be so many rewarding lessons in that. The IHS, the Indian Health Services, provides internships for summer or throughout the year that anybody can apply to, Native, non-Native. And, the government is looking for healthcare professionals to work in these communities. It's not stressed highly like it should be. It's not talked about as much, and it's not talked about in the med school curriculum, like how how Native people are facing all of these health crises, and we're, you know, kind of more focused on global experiences and traveling abroad during the summer. And don't get me wrong, that's super important too. But I also just feel like there should be a voice and more advocacy to, you know, just travel miles down the road, like 100 miles north, 100 miles south, like go to a different state and like, look what's here, like look what's in your backyard. And so I think that would be my advice is don't be hesitant, don't be reluctant. You know, I think there's kind of maybe a negative way of thinking that it's going to be like really tough, or like there's going to be a lot of racism. And, you know, there very well could be, but it's also like Native people are the most welcoming, funny, like they just want to be acknowledged and their natural rights recognized, and they want to be heard. They, you know, they want to go to a doctor's office and be explained what a medication is and like learn how to take it. And so I think it will be just an incredible experience for somebody to work in that community and to see like what it's like, and if it's for you, and if not, then it's just going to be a great experience to carry forward in your future practice. So I think that's my recommendation.
So lastly, what do you look forward to these next couple of years, and what's the impact you want to have on your community?
So next few years, I think I'm, you know, more like short-term goals. I'm like super excited to start seeing patients again. Right. I really miss seeing patients weekly. Taking care of them was the highlight of my week, and I felt like I was actually doing doctor things. So, you know, I can't wait for that and to continue building my clinical skills. And, you know, I'm just like super excited to also apply for the NETR has the longitudinal integrated clerkship program. Mm-hmm. And it's basically a rural track for med students. And I'm so excited. I also forgot to mention that was also one of the reasons why I chose NETR was because of that program. And it's in Fort Kent, Maine. And I'm, you know, eventually want to use that experience to build meaningful long-term relationships with patients and to take care of them in any context, you know, whether it be OBGYN, primary care, peds, you know, taking care of a family's grandparents. Like I want to be able to do it all. And I think that program will give me that opportunity to see what that will be like. And if that's like what I want to do. So I think that's also what I'm looking forward to. And I know that long-term it will help me because that's how I see myself. I want to be a family med doctor doing all spectrum care. And I want to work hopefully at my, you know, go home and bring all the skills and knowledge that I've learned back to my community and just build a Native run clinic from the scratch that combines Western with traditional medicine. And it's just going to be so awesome. And I have my Brooks, who's interested in helping, and my brother, Atun, who's just got accepted into physical therapy school. And, you know, how cool would it be to have physical therapy incorporated into our clinic? Like, I think there's lots of incredible goals. And then also one more thing that I'm looking forward to, non-medicine related, is the weightlifting. I think I have my eyes set on the Connecticut women's state record.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm hoping, yeah, I know. I'm hoping that by the time I finish med school, you know, the next few years, that I'll be able to get that. So I'm kind of close. I'm not, you know, I think with a couple more years, I think it's possible. So I'm also looking forward to that.
Alrighty. Well, Lala, I do appreciate you sharing your story and learning about you and learning about the natives. I think it's really beneficial even for like me and other med students or people in medicine just to kind of know about all these other issues as well.
Yeah, Eric, I can't thank you enough for providing this platform. This is the first time that I've heard of any med student doing this, and I think what you're doing is spectacular, and I hope that we also get to hear your story. And I think this is awesome, and I thank you so much for thinking about me and asking me, and I am more than grateful and happy, and I'm just super thankful that you gave me the space to tell my story. So thank you.
Thank you for joining me on another episode of Behind the White Coat. Please make sure you subscribe either on iTunes or Spotify so you can get notified when the next episode is released. Thank you for your time.